Thanks for joining us for another edition of Homegrown. On this episode, we head out to the Mount Rushmore Angus Ranch, owned by Eddie Ripkema, and we sit down with Eddie and ranch manager David Urich to learn all about their operation.
My Uncle Eddie, who I'm named after, had the 76 Angus Ranch in Boulder Canyon. He was the mayor of Deadwood between somewhere in 1958 and 62, and he got in the cattle business in Boulder Canyon. Okay. He had about 25 head or 30, and Dad bought some cows, and they ran them on shares back in the 60s and early 70s. Yep. So Dad had the opportunity to purchase 100 acres just south of the fairgrounds at Hermosa. Mm-hmm. And he went to Minnetonka, Nebraska, to Shelco Cattle Company. He bought 11 cows and 1 bull. And that's where the whole dream started. Yeah. And he always had a belief if he couldn't make it in business that he could raise a garden, he could milk a cow, and he could feed his family and slaughter a beef. He was going to be a provider for his family no matter come hell or high water, really, you know. Yeah. And that's what he did. And he had a dream to make it bigger and a vision to keep acquiring a little more land when the opportunities came aboard, you know. Sure. And when we built a sale barn down at the Hermosa Ranch, and when we sold that, we bought the Spring Creek place. We built another sale barn there, and that's where the present sale is held. So they've been doing purebred bulls ever since? Yes, we've basically been in it since day one in the purebred business, or shortly thereafter in 74, 75. We just got back from a road trip, David and I, to Montana. We went to 3 different studs up there, and we're always looking for our future sires or AI sires to use in the future. Yep. And we've been fortunate to acquire some of the very top bloodlines in the business, and we AI about everything on the ranch twice. We sell about 140 bulls in our sale. We retain about 125 heifers. If you do it right, people will come back to you. Sure. And that's what we like about ranching. We try to treat our customers excellent. I try to treat my employees excellent, and I do the best that I can. And pretty humble beginning when you look at the total picture versus where we're at today versus the 110 acres in 1972. Whether it be building Mount Rushmore Angus or the car business, or, you know, I know you volunteered with the Black Hills Stock Show. You know, you've obviously done a ton to just build this entire community. Where did that passion come from? And tell us about some of the things you've been involved in. Well, I'll tell you, it really came, everything, my dad was a blessing to our family. He gave us a hell of a head start. Yeah. You know, it wouldn't be possible without him. Sure. I still honor his dreams today. I still honor that dream of building that ranch because that's what my dad wanted to do. It comes back to my heart, really. Right. And I just think so often when my dad's looking over the place, how proud he's got to be of where that ranch is today. But somewhere, that had to be his passion had to turn into your passion as well, or you wouldn't still be doing it. Well, it is. I like people. Yeah. And I volunteered with the Stock Show Foundation. I was on the board of that for 10 years and so forth. Way back when I was on the Central States Fair Board. You give back to the community will give to you. Yeah. And so we try to give, it's just not a take situation all the time. Right. You give, you receive. Yeah. And that's kind of our philosophy. So I try my best to stay active in the community, the Chamber of Commerce, and you're abreast of what's going on in Rapid City, what the needs are, where agriculture's at. I served on the Chamber Egg Committee in the day. We used to have the egg picnic down at the ranch just to bring the city folks out to the ranch and teach them or educate them in some form or another about ranching life. Yep. I'm not physically on the ranch every day. I got a crew down there. I talk to David, our ranch manager, 3 or 4 times a week. He tells me what the plan is. We just have an open line of communication. I do not believe in micromanaging people. They want to make it better than I want it, really. Yeah. If you give them the rein to go out and do it. Right. And that's just kind of our philosophy. I kid him sometimes. I said, well, so what's the guys doing today? Well, they're helping Jack, or they're over to Baker's, or they're over to Gary's or something. I says, man, we sure volunteer a lot around the neighborhood. He says, you know what, that's the way this neighborhood was built. And he says, believe me, we get it back.
Yeah.
He says, they're over here as much as we're over there, and we just exchange a lot of labor to keep the costs down, and I enjoy that, you know. I've got really the best help in the world down there. I think you met David Jurek, my ranch manager. You don't find anybody that's more sincere and knowledgeable about the cattle business than David, and as trustworthy as he is. And I've got 2 other hired men down there, and they work fabulous as a team. They meet every morning, and they put a game plan together for the day.
There's 2 sexes basically when a calf's born. There's either a heifer or a bull. Every male, for the most part, is born intact as a bull and has the capability to reproduce. At the time of castration, removing that reproductive ability, they become steers. And so that's the difference between a bull and a steer. So the main objective of our operation is a bull sale. And so we sort through, and what does not make a bull, we put a band on and actually mechanically castrate them and make them steers. Put them on trucks, and they're gonna go to a feedlot in Nebraska. We retain the ownership on them, as well as collect the data on them. We use that for basically in-herd use for the most part. We'll start calving, the 1st of January, generally speaking, or within a day or 2 of there. And by the time stock show rolls around, we're 70 to 80% done.
Which is one thing AI can do for you, because they're bred this day.
Yep. Yep. And so in doing that, equates to the mineral programs, the breed ups have to be good. We have to have a high percentage of pregnancies in that first cycle. We have to have a high percentage of pregnancies through the whole breeding season.
Right, and so those genetics are also then, a good strong reproductive female or male. Those genetics are passed down to your bull customers then as well.
Yep.
So you always got an eye for that.
Some operations, when I talk about replacements, we keep our own heifers to breed back, to put back in the herd. Some operations buy cows yearly. They don't calve heifers.
Right.
We can trace the lineage on every one of our cows. We collect AHIR data, which is herd improvement data, herd improvement records. So birth weights, weaning weights, yearling weights. For the bulls, scrotal measurements, sometimes yearling height. We do ultrasound information, we can collect that. The trend right now in the Angus industry and the commercial Angus industry is we want small calves at birth. Small calves generally speaking equate to calving ease, which, we can argue that all day long. But then we want explosive growth. Commercial producers sell those calves in the fall.
Right.
Pounds matter to them. So light birth weight, heavy weaning weight, heavy fall weight. That equates to real dollars to producers. With calving ease, you cut down on birthing problems, calf loss, cow loss.
Yep.
There's a whole gamut of stuff there. Sometimes you do see with high birth weights, you have a hard time getting those cows to breed back too. So.
Sure.
And what these are is some 2-year-old cows that lost calves this spring. We just threw them out on grass for the summer. We brought them back in. I have a kill date for them in December. We'll sell them as beef.
What are we feeding?
It's a mixture that we put together with help of our nutritionist. It's cracked corn, dry distiller grains, and then a grower pellet. It's got a mineral package in it. These guys are eating somewhere around 20 pounds of corn and
All the hay they can
Basically free choice hay, yep.
The corn is the energy. The distiller's grain really ups that protein. Those are our macronutrients, and then that grower pellet really balances their whole diet, so it gives them all the nutrients, just like you and me taking a one-a-day vitamin or something. So these are feedlot cattle where we're cramping their space and treating them poorly and all that. I mean, look at how abused they look. They get a better balanced diet than most people do, and fresh, clean water, all the roughages and hay they can eat.
So when you talk about fat cattle, you can measure back fat, you can measure rump fat, you can measure ribeye size, you can measure marbling scores. We can measure tenderness. Some of that stuff, you can do an ultrasound in a live form,
right?
Or we can collect all that data and get even better data after harvest. Mm-hmm. And tenderness is a big one for consumer satisfaction. You know, nobody really wants to chew on a piece of meat, right? And flavor comes from marbling.
Your main enterprise is selling other animals for reproductive purposes, but you still keep an eye on that end product that consumers want. And through your genetics and your selection and what you're doing on this place, that has a lot to do with the overall, consumption of beef at the end.
Right.
That's cool.
So again, he's just putting a little bit in there and watching the scale so they get the exact right mixture in there. When the corn goes in, they get some of that energy out of it to make the ethanol, but the byproduct is the distiller's grains, and that's really high in protein yet, and it really makes a really good additive to the feed, so they feed quite a bit of that. This other bin is cracked corn, so that corn is high in carbohydrates, high in energy, so that gives the animals all they need to start growing and the energy they need to run. They have this big 4-chambered stomach, the biggest one, the rumen, has this microbial population in there, all these little bitty bugs, these little microbes, and they need this grass and roughages, so the grass or hay or any of those plants, that's what feeds those microbes, and it keeps the cow warm, and that's kind of how their whole digestive system works. So even though we feed them the concentrates, the grains, the corn, the distiller's grain, they still need a bunch of the hay in there as well. So what this is it's probably corn silage, and they run that as the corn's a big mature plant. They run the entire plant through this thing, and it chops it up into these little pieces. Right, and you can smell it. Just has this really sweet smell, and it's still wet. But all these little pieces, they put it in there when it's green, put it in this pile, and drive over top of it and pack it down. It kind of looks gross and crusty up on top here, but what that does is it packs it in tight so that it creates an anaerobic environment, so no oxygen can get in there while that plant's still green and moist, and then that actually will ferment, and that's what actually keeps it from molding, is that there's no oxygen able to get to it. It ferments a little bit, so it's just like a pickling process, and you can tell the cows just love it. It's still wet and moist. Even in the middle of winter, you'll see it's just steaming because they just pick off on one end so that the whole pile stays nice and protected within an oxygen-free environment. And this edge is all they pick from, gradually getting back into that pile. But it's just a wonderful all-around feed, and it really utilizes that whole corn plant.
Well, so what we've done is loaded our hay, we've loaded our silage, loaded our corn, and loaded our dry distillers, and we've got a grower pellet left to load. So we were talking earlier about the multivitamin, the mineral package, and the thiamine with the high sulfur and stuff like that. That's what this is. It's just like a creep feed pellet we mix in there. They get like 3/4 of a pound of that a day. There's nothing cheap about raising cattle. Everything is $1,000 bills, there's no question. So we feed these bulls twice a day. Efficiency in the cattle industry, I think, is a term that's overused, but ultimately that's what we're all striving for. we're developing them for that. But we want them to gain well too, and so we feed them twice a day, and studies have shown when you feed twice a day, your grains actually increase, you keep cattle on feed better, the health of the animals better. You're easily 2 years into that pound of product before it hits the shelf. I was raised in an ag environment, so it's very important to me that my kids understand agriculture. What they do with their life is their decision.
Right.
Would I love to see them in agriculture? Yeah. Is there a part of me that hopes they find something out of agriculture but understand it? Yeah. But they're your kids. You're going to be supportive no matter what they do.
Absolutely.
You know, in my world, they get to see things that other kids don't. And they understand things that other kids don't. And that's a big part of my life.
This isn't always easy out here, what we do.
Right.
It can be long days, it can be hot days, it can be cold days, but at the end, if you can see your 4-year-old riding a pony around and just enjoying life and understanding production ag, understanding that we have these cows and we treat them with the utmost respect and try to give them the best life we could, but at the same time they're there for a purpose and they got to get bred and some of them are going to get harvested and they understand the circle of life, I think, from a pretty early age. Just yesterday you were out on a fire. There's been, you know, thankfully there hasn't been that many bad fires this year, which is really quite unbelievable, but you know, you were out on a fire and the community just pulls together when those things happen. Talk about your volunteerism there. Yeah,
you know, I'm a member of the Folsom Volunteer Fire Department. And it's a Custer County department. I'm gonna go back to 4-H, James. You know, in 4-H we grow up with community service projects.
Right.
Giving back to a community, civic duty type stuff, right? Firefighting has always been something that interested me growing up. Mount Rushmore Angus, we actually had a fire in March on one of our Forest Service allotments. It burned a couple thousand acres. It was there were several of us that got burned out there.
Yeah.
The fire yesterday, you know, our conditions are prime such. That wasn't the only one. I know of 3 fires yesterday that one was actually started with a shot horse.
Really?
And, you know, it's
a little spark on a...
Yeah.
Wow.
Shoes on a horse.
That just tells you how dry it is. If a spark from a horseshoe on a rock can start a fire.
I know there's been some firefighters leave the state. They're out on California and Oregon, wherever the fires are.
Right.
So you take that and you add on to the ongoing fires. Yesterday it was a little stressful.
Right, because you were just, resources are stretched thin.
Yeah.
And you know, a lot of people think, oh, well, it's just a grass fire way out there, not that big a deal. Well, you know, that's our feed for these animals. Right. That's a big deal, especially in a drought situation where we're already short on hay and grass.
We harvest grass and turn it into protein. And when we don't have grass, we're buying hay or we're selling cows, one or the other, right? So when something burns up, it's really hard for those of us that are involved in that to say, oh, it's just grass.
Right.
Oh, it's not structures and nobody was harmed. I understand that. But where we harvest that, it's really hard for us to say it's just grass.
Mm-hmm.
That is how we make our living.
Right.
The only option there that doesn't require more money is selling those animals.
Yeah.
So if we're buying hay, we're taking away from our profit. If we're renting more grass, we're taking away from our profit. So it's that gets to be kind of a sore subject sometimes with producers.
It's tough.
And I don't think anybody says it negligently or spitefully or anything like that. It's just that the producers are in a different position and they don't see it the same way.
Right.
My father was on fair boards. He was on school boards. You know, it's kind of who we are,
Yeah.
right? Things that are important to you, you're going to make an effort to make sure they happen.
Right. Yep.
And fair is part of that.
Yep.
For me, stock show's part of that. Stock growers, you know, they're focused on a lot of things there, you
Yep.
know, including aspects of the beef industry to property ownership, taxes, so on and so forth. My dad is probably as much to do with the registered cattle as anybody. You know, he got us kids started in the registered cows, and I love the registered world. I love the lineage. I love talking about cattle. I love looking at cattle. It would be very hard for me to envision my life without cows in some fashion. There's days where I'd like to harvest every one of them, but then it's gratifying for me to take my kids out. They understand certain aspects of that. You know, every time we start calving, they always want to be in the
Yep.
barn when that first calf is.
That's an exciting time.
Yeah. I guess that'd be my passion. Everybody asks me what your hobbies are. I guess it's probably cows.
Yeah.
Burns most of my daylight hours.
Yep.
And nighttime too.
So many people out there today that just take the food supply for granted. They have no idea. The labor and the love and the hard work and the sweat, the production that people go through and sacrifice every day
Yeah.
to try to better the world, better the food supply, feed their family, and they're the backbone of our country, quite honestly, is the rural people.
Taylor rides just as well as any